Hello and welcome back to another GeoGuessr video. I'm going to be continuing my series today on learning within GeoGuessr and using certain things, certain items around the world and things that you find in various countries to work out where you are or narrow down where you are. Today I'm going to be doing road markings around the world, and I've created a map that I think covers most of the countries around the world that are distinguishable pretty much using only the road markings, alongside other obvious things like the side of the road you're driving on, the geography of the landscape, northern versus southern hemisphere, that sort of thing. So I've got about 10 or so countries to go through. Hopefully they all come up if I play the map 3 or 4 times. So let's just get in. You shouldn't have to move within this map because most of the locations, or almost all of the locations, I've made it so that you can identify what side of the road you're driving on. You should get enough information about the landscape. So let's start. And we start off with driving on the left, and we've got a center yellow road marking, double yellow with white edge markings. Now, where's the sun? I mean, I know where we are. We're in New Zealand, but I'm just going to explain in a second. So we can see we're in the southern hemisphere as well. So these things combine. You've got the left-hand drive, southern hemisphere. So that kind of puts us in either southern Africa, or it puts us in Australia or New Zealand. Now, Australia does not have yellow center markings, at least as far as I've seen. There might be some exceptions, but if you see this and you figure out you're probably in Australia, New Zealand, you're going to be in New Zealand. So let's go into New Zealand. Sometimes this can be dashed, by the way. Dashed center one, and it usually only appears on trunk roads, like major roads in New Zealand, but at least if you see this, you know you're there. So let's guess, and we're in New Zealand. Correct. Next round. Right. Okay, so we're driving on the right. Yeah, it is the right, isn't it? Yep. I just wasn't sure if I was looking at the back of the truck there for a second. We got the yellow edge markings. So yellow edge markings are fairly common around the world in some places, but you can usually use them combined with the driving side to figure out where you are. So we've got kind of an arid landscape, and we're driving on the right, and we've got the yellow edge markings. This puts us in the Middle East. So because of GeoGuessr coverage, or Google coverage, that means we're in one of 3 countries. We're in Israel, we're in Jordan, or we're in UAE. Now, sometimes it's a little difficult to differentiate between the 3 of these, apart from language. Obviously, if you see Hebrew, you're going to be in Israel. If you see, I think both Jordan and UAE speak Arabic, but I'm not certain on that. But you should be able to at least distinguish a little bit, or at least narrow it down. So we know we're in one of those 3 countries. From the looks of things, I think I'm going to go UAE, but it could be Jordan. We're in UAE. I might do a video at some point talking about specific areas of the world. So for example, these 3 countries, how to differentiate between them, because that might be useful. There are a couple of groups of countries in this road markings map that are quite difficult to tell the difference between. We'll get into those, I'm sure. So here we go. We've got yellow edge markings, and we're driving on the left. Right. So, like I said, right side drive, arid landscape, yellow edge markings. It usually is the Middle East. I think they can show up in South America actually, but usually you can tell the difference in landscape. But here we're driving on the left with the yellow edge markings. Now this locates us in southern Africa, especially with, it's kind of hard to tell, but the sun is in the north as well, which puts us in the southern hemisphere. So these 4 African countries that usually show up if you've got these yellow edge markings are South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, and Eswatini. Uganda isn't actually in this map. It can show up. It is left-hand drive, and I believe it can have yellow edge markings, but it's less common, and I think it's not completely typical of the country, whereas these yellow edge markings always show up in these countries, unless it's not a paved road. So we've got to choose one of those four. Usually you can tell the difference between these, and I might do a video about that at some point. This looks to be South Africa just because of the quality of the road, but it could easily be Botswana. Let's go South Africa. And it was Botswana, but we've narrowed it down at least. So next round, and we are driving on the right, and we've got the yellow edge markings again, which places us in the Middle East, especially with this landscape. Having said that, it is quite green, but I think we're probably going to go Israel or Jordan here. I think I'll actually go Israel, and we were correct, actually, we're very close. So you can usually differentiate between the countries using the landscape as well, of course. So next round. Excellent, right. So this is a very unique one. This specific square road marking, very small squares. This is only found, as far as I know, in Denmark. This is a unique road marking to Denmark. So if you see these road markings, you should be able to pinpoint yourself pretty quickly. So I'm just going to go into Denmark and, received a badge. But yes, we were in Denmark. Okay. So that was the first game. I think we got every country right, except for Botswana. And we'll play again. I think we'll play 2 more times. Hopefully all the locations come up. Right, so are we driving on the left again? And we've got the yellow center marking. So like I said before, this is New Zealand. I don't even need to look at the hemisphere, what hemisphere we're in, but it's pretty... Oh no, the sun's over there. So southern hemisphere, yellow center marking. I'm just going to go into New Zealand. Excellent. I'll talk about, by the way, the difference between New Zealand and Australia when it comes up. I think I touched on it briefly, but I could give you a bit more insight. So we're driving on the right, yellow edge markings. This puts us in the Middle East. We've got Arabic there on the sign. I reckon this is Jordan. I think it's Jordan. Let's go Jordan. Yeah. Next round. Okay. It's New Zealand again. So I'm just gonna, I explained it already, so I'm just gonna go in there. Hopefully we get, we're just getting same locations, it's a bit of a pity. But again, we're in the Middle East because of the yellow edge markings. Right, let's go for Israel here. Yep. Okay, finally a new location, and a unique one at that. So, like I said, Denmark obviously is very unique. This is another very unique one. Obviously, we're driving on the left, and the yellow dashed edge markings, these can only be found in Ireland. I don't think they can be found anywhere else, especially they certainly can't be found in any other left-hand drive country. I've never seen them in the UK. So let's go straight into Ireland, place, and we're correct. And view summary. So that was good. A couple of identical locations showing up again, so let's play again. There's a couple more countries I wanted to address, and good, we have got, I believe this is Australia. Actually, it's interesting, those white bollards with the red, that's similar to the, if not identical to the Dutch and I think the Turkish bollards as well. So it's good to know Australia has those. But anyways, we are driving on the left, as you can see. And now I can get into the difference between Australia and New Zealand. Australia, as far as I have seen, doesn't have yellow road markings. So, especially not yellow center road markings. So if you see the white dashed center line or even the white solid center line, and you're driving on the left and you're in the southern hemisphere, you're going to be in Australia. Obviously, driving on the left and yellow edge markings puts you in southern Africa. So white edge markings should put you in New Zealand or Australia, and usually you can use the landscape to differentiate between the two anyways, but there's your sort of difference between the two countries. So let's put ourselves in Australia. There we go. Next round. Okay, so we're driving on the left, yellow edge markings, so it puts us in southern Africa. This is obviously quite mountainous, so I think this actually could put us in Lesotho or Eswatini. I can't remember which one's the more mountainous one. I know that there is a difference between the two of them that involves the types of trees you can see, or even I think if one of them has more trees and the other one doesn't. I'm going to go Lesotho. Oh, it was actually Cape Town. Well, there you go. It was South Africa, but we narrowed it down. So that's sort of what I wanted to get at. You can sort of narrow it down. My next choice would have been Eswatini, and then I would have gone South Africa. So I would have got it in 3 guesses, I guess. Okay. Still not another new one, unfortunately. I was hoping to see a Scandinavian country come up. I've got Norway and Finland in this map that hopefully will come up at some point. If it doesn't come up at the end of this round, I'll talk about them briefly. Anyways, we're driving on the left, yellow edge markings. So this puts us in South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, or Eswatini. So let's go Botswana for this one. And we were correct. Right. So there's your very unique Danish edge markings. I was going to say these can kind of show up on single lane roads, but they can also show up on dual carriageways or motorways. So that's useful to know. If you see those, you're in Denmark. And there we go. And unfortunately, we haven't got one of the other Scandinavian countries that I was hoping to come up. So we're driving on the left, and it's yellow edge marking. So we're in one of the southern African countries that I spoke about. I think we go for South Africa. Yeah, it was Botswana, but we narrowed it down. So let's just briefly talk about the other 2 locations I wanted to discuss, and that's Norway and Finland. First Norway. So if you are in the northern hemisphere driving on the right, Norway's landscape is pretty unique anyways, but specifically to Norway, sort of separate from the other Scandinavian countries. I should say, not sure Finland considers itself Scandinavian, but let's not get into that. Separate from the other countries in that area is the yellow center road marking. So if you see this yellow center road marking and you look to be in Scandinavia somewhere, you are going to be in Norway. So that is something to try and remember. And another one is, hopefully this is, which one's it? Yeah, here we go. Right. So this is the other sort of common road marking you'll see in Norway, and that's this sort of side edge dashed white lines. So these are not unique to Norway. You can see these in Finland as well. I haven't actually got Finland in this map. I probably should have included it. The difference that you can tell between these Norwegian ones and the Finnish ones is something to do with the size. So these are quite long edge markings, and hopefully if I go into a Swedish road, okay, they're not dashed. Let's try and find a dashed one. There we go. So you can see these are sort of a bit shorter and almost fatter than the Norwegian ones. And they have, I think, less space, maybe the same amount of space between them, but they're slightly different. And even then, if you see these white dashed edge markings, you're probably in Norway or Sweden, one of the two. And you can, hedge your bets and have your second guesses, one of the other ones. So, into the last country, and that's Finland. This is a unique country for road markings, fairly unique. So if you see you're in the northern hemisphere, and you see white edge markings. Actually, this is not a great picture to be using because these center markings are yellow, but unfortunately you can't see them obviously from this. There we go. Right, so this is another variation of that, but the key thing is you've got white edge markings, which is, again, different from Norway and Sweden, which usually have dashed edge markings, but also uniquely you have the yellow center marking. So obviously we're combining this with looking at northern hemisphere, driving on the right, that sort of thing, because these markings can come up in Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand is specifically the yellow center line, but we can tell we're in the northern hemisphere and we're driving on the right, so it's Finland. So we've got that yellow center one, and then the other variation is the double yellow line, if I can find it. There we go. So that covers the countries around the world that I believe are distinguishable using only the road markings. I should sort of say that there are other countries around the world. I'm specifically thinking actually of America, south and north, that they probably use these road markings I've talked about, but they have different rules within different areas of those countries. They don't have sort of a general sort of rule for road markings around the entire country like the ones that I've talked about. And I don't believe that you can identify those countries using just the road markings. There's more things that you have to look at. Whereas these countries that I've talked about, generally if you see those road markings and those things combined with the driving side and geography, that gives you enough information. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.